Anime is turning you into a pick-me. And I know that's triggering to hear because no one wants to be referred to as a pick-me. And I also know that a lot of people are pretty much raised on anime and YouTube. And so this is a really important part of people's understandings of the world and just how they perceive themselves in general. I also know that it's really important to understand what you're consuming, whether that be food, music, or video media in general. Before you get angry and write the paragraphs that I'm sure I'm going to be receiving, have an open mind and watch this to the end of the video. The outline for this video is, first, I'm going to go into some personal anecdotes and how overall I got into anime. And then secondly, I'm going to define what a pick-me is in my lens so that we can have terms that we are both congruent on. And then I'm going to give a brief history of Japan and just how they're postured, or how Japan has shown up as a colonial force in the past. And after that, I'm going to outline the ways that anime is specifically brainwashing you, the tropes that we tend to see, and just the patterns that we see over and over in anime. And finally, if you're someone who identifies as an otaku or someone who likes anime, then I'm going to just say some next steps at the end so that you can take this information and have a way of being that might feel more comfortable now that you know and have more of an awareness around the ways that anime might be affecting you. When I was first introduced to anime, it was pretty much like Saturday mornings when you would see like Dragon Ball being played, and I grew up poor, so I didn't have any cable, so I just watched whatever like the antenna would provide for free. That was like CW, that was a bunch of random channels. If you grew up without cable, you know, I can't really go into that right now. It was like my first impression of anime, but I didn't realize anime was like a legitimate entire genre from another country and it would be originally in its own language. Like, I didn't have that understanding of anime. And the first like real anime that I got into was Attack on Titan, and that was because there was this girl that I knew. She was the daughter of a client of my father. She was so pretty and she was so down to earth. She was pretty and down to earth, and that's what drew me in about her, because like we all know that pretty people exist, but a lot of pretty people are not relatable. And in part, I think that's because they can't be relatable, because if they are, then people try to take advantage of them. But also, as like a 12-year-old at the time, I didn't have this understanding. I didn't perceive myself as a pretty person. It was really refreshing to see a girl who I could relate with. I also want to point out that a lot of my friends, when I was really into anime, they weren't necessarily like girls. They were girls in the sense that they were always around women, but in retrospect, they were always around women because they didn't feel like they were deserving of men. Or like if a man wasn't around, they would put him on a pedestal. Or if a man was around, they would kind of idealize him and comfortably throw another woman under the bus. I was an avid anime watcher in like high school, and then I stopped because a friend of mine like bullied me because I watched a lot of anime. And then, haha, lo and behold, who started watching anime after bullying me about it. Another part of like my experience when I was an avid anime watcher was that I would really like dress in a revealing way. And that's probably in part anime and in part the fact that I grew up from the Caribbean, but I never felt pressured to like dress more revealing because my parents said I should, but I did feel like I should do it because of how I just saw women in anime getting attention when they were revealing or when they wore revealing clothing. Now I understand that attention from a man means nothing, but when I was like a younger high school student, I didn't know how I should operate in the world in order to attract the type of dynamic that I wanted to attract. Something that I noticed like right at the beginning of my anime watching journey was that the ads I would get were very like porn-ish, and I thought that was really weird because I wasn't watching that. Like, the ads I would get were reflecting that. This was Kiss Anime, I think. No, this was the site before Kiss Anime became popular that everyone would watch anime on, and I can't remember what it was called, but it would have like the Blue Exorcist guy on the sides, and then it would have ads over and underneath that, and the ads that I was getting was very like inappropriate. The reason for that is because I think the people who had these sites up, one, knew that SEX sells and people are going to like buy pretty much what is rooted in SEX. And also, the target audience for anime at the time was young men. And they knew that if they used that to show young men information, then that would also help them convert. This is me observing this through like a marketing and sales lens. I just thought it was weird that I was getting those ads, and I wasn't necessarily embarrassed by it because I knew I wasn't watching that. But like when people came over to the house, they would see me watching anime on these screens that had this weird, inappropriate stuff behind it, and I'm sure they had their own judgments and conclusions, as would I, as an adult now, if I saw a child watching that stuff. Another thing that I experienced when I was an avid anime watcher was like this one time, this was in college, and this was after I stopped watching anime, but I still liked the characters that I had grown like emotionally attached to. I bought a poster so I could put it up on my dorm, and this guy I knew, and I hope he doesn't see this because I know he follows this brand, he like asked me, do you really watch this? Men will think women don't have the capacity to consume that type of material, and when they see that a woman is consuming that or has consumed it, they're like trying to question her or like investigate like, how much do you really know, or are you just saying that because you want to like be liked? But this is just the stuff that you see in like communities of people who watch anime. Now I'm going to go into what I understand a pick-me to be. A pick-me refers to a woman who consciously or unconsciously adjusts herself to seek male approval, often at the expense of her own identity or values. She may prioritize men's desires, thoughts, and validation, hoping to be chosen or favored by them, particularly in romantic or social contexts. I want to say that there's a lot of nuance to how I understand a pick-me to be. In my understanding, the point is that you are centering men instead of centering your dream lifestyle or your dream life. For example, if in order to attract people who are going to encompass or embody or populate that dream life, you have to shift things in order to get closer to the level of privilege that you have to embody that life, then I'm in full support of that. But I think a pick-me specifically is trying to center men and then do everything that she can to get a man. And that's where I'm like, okay, now I feel like you are doing a lot and you could do less. Because if you center any one being or any person outside of yourself, they're constantly evolving themselves. So you're literally just going to be running a race that you're never going to win. I also think that not only does a pick-me embody like that stereotypical, like, oh my God, I'm not like the other girls type of vibe, but I think a pick-me can also downplay or devalue traditionally feminine traits like emotionality or vulnerability in favor of being perceived as cool. She may position herself in competition with other women, believing that aligning with men's preferences makes her more desirable. I don't know if as a society people understand this to be pick-me's, but I think if you are constantly looking at men and doing the opposite of what a man would want to do in order to like keep them away, I think that kind of makes you like an anti-pick-me, but still a pick-me because you're centering your world around what a man may or may not like instead of going inward and asking yourself, what do I want to do in this moment? So I think whether you like men so much that you're willing to kind of negate your own personhood, or whether you hate men so much that you're, again, willing to negate your own personhood and what you want to do, you're still kind of in that pick-me realm. Now I'm going to go into some of the things that Japan has done to take its place as a colonial empire. And this is really important because a lot of people are watching anime willy-nilly. They're all culturally like rich. Like, yeah, Japan does have a rich cultural history. So do most Asian countries because they've just been around for a long time. Their societies are really old. But Japan specifically, a lot of the Asian countries don't like Japan because they were like the Israel of Asia. I'm going to insert a clip of a creator who talks about the RAPE of Nanking, which is a book on the history of Japan.
But numbers don't tell the full story of the Nanking. You really can't measure the degree of torture and suffering that was inflicted upon the civilians in that city. There were stories of women who were nailed to walls and impaled after being, or nailed to boards and run over by army tanks. There were stories of people being hanged by their tongues on iron hooks or buried waist down in the soil so they could be ripped apart by German shepherds. Even small children weren't spared the carnage at Nanking. Babies were tossed in the air and bayoneted on the way down or thrown alive into vats of boiling water. Indeed, the violence would prove to be so brutal in the city that even the Nazi party members in Nanking were shocked at the spectacle.
Now that I've warmed you up, here are my main points. The first point is that a lot of anime is inherently centered on men. And when you're constantly watching these male narratives being performed or told, then you kind of internalize that men are the center of the world. This goes back to how, like, when you're growing up, if you don't see a lot of people who look like you in roles or positions of power or on platforms where they're portrayed as beautiful, as the beauty standard, overall in a position where they seem to have influence, then you're not really going to have the capacity to imagine a world where that may be possible for you. If you're constantly told something over and over and over again, then that's going to slowly seep into your unconscious mind and you're going to start displaying patterns of that in the world. Recently, I watched a video and...
What makes you qualified to have a discussion, to be a voice where men are talking about, it's called Man Enough.
Mm-hmm.
What makes you qualified to be a part of that conversation and have a voice?
The same thing that makes you the most qualified to have a conversation about whiteness. That you as a black man understand whiteness far more than I understand it, or Justin can understand it.
What a great answer.
And it is not to say that it's your labor or your work, but you actually can teach us way more about it because you have had to deal with it every single minute. When you're the oppressed group, you know everything about the oppressor. You know things that they don't even know about themselves.
When you're constantly being fed that men are this all-powerful being, men are the protagonist, men are your biggest force that you're ever going to go up against, then that seeps into your subconscious. In part, it does reflect the greater reality. Like, for example, a lot of the violence that's caused onto women is through intimate partner relationships. Having to contend with all these truths and also being constantly fed that men are saviors and men are all powerful is something that is going to start impacting you, and it's going to create duplicity in how you perceive the world. Duality is important, nuance is important, but duplicity can greatly impact the way that you see yourself in relationship to men, in relationship to society as a whole. For example, Boa Hancock in One Piece, like, this is this gorgeous, very powerful woman, and she does not have any self-respect, especially when it comes to Luffy, who is her dream man, I guess. He censors that man a lot. And you see that even her character, which comes from an all-woman island, is centering a man, which is also really weird if you would like consider the way that that would actually tend to play out in terms of a society that is cut off from men as a whole. The next point is that anime really reinforces the idea that women are here to overgive and to over-nurture and to overextend. For example, Sakura is constantly overgiving, but the issue is that they don't see her overgiving as valuable, as something that is of worth. And this goes back to how people are devaluing feminine energy, authentic feminine energy. Like, people like having women around when they're in their masculine, proving their worth, proving that they have value, proving that they are a tool that can be exploited. You don't need to do all that for someone healthy to come and see that you have value and you have worth and you ought to be prioritized and invested in. In anime, women are constantly overextending themselves or overgiving or doing a lot overall, and the value in what they're bringing is diminished and made to seem as if it's a hassle almost. Next point is that anime kind of gives men a savior complex. A healthy woman is going to have things that she can bring to the table, things of value, characteristics that she does, things that she's passionate and very much knowledgeable on. And there has to be an environment in a healthy dynamic where you feel confident enough to be better than a man in an arena. When you are better than a man in that arena, there has to be trust in you to perform better than him. Imagine a world where you constantly have to step on eggshells to make sure a man doesn't feel intimidated by you. That sounds so exhausting. And I do think men and women are equal, but they're not the same. So yes, there are going to be things where a man is going to bring to the table that a woman probably couldn't do as well. Same goes in reverse. But in anime, the things that women bring to the table are like secondary or like not as important. For example, in One Piece, Nami and Robin are really dope, but they are literally secondary characters. And in a lot of anime, the woman will be the secondary character. Point number 4 is that the way women are portrayed in anime reflects the romantic fantasies of men, not the humanity of women. Like, women in anime have massive, massive breasts. And on top of that, the female characters that everyone tends to like, for some reason, are characters who center men. For example, Hinata. Everyone likes Hinata. Why is that? Is it because she's submissive and meek and she doesn't get in the way and she does what she's told and she obeys? A lot of people poo on feminine energy, and it's because there are people who are telling them what feminine energy needs to look like. Your feminine energy is authentic to you because you are your own person. No one can come and tell you what feminine energy needs to look like. Even I, a coach, can't tell you what feminine energy needs to look like. But I can point out the ways that you've been conditioned to think that you should be operating, the ways that are kind of self-sabotaging your dream life, the ways in which you keep yourself quiet and you keep yourself small. With that being said, I do have a feminine communication and seduction course, and with it comes 6 months of group coaching where we go into somatic healing and how to get in touch with the sensations that come up in your body. It's a great opportunity, especially if you identify as someone who has trouble with receiving, if you identify as someone who has trouble communicating their boundaries, if you identify as someone who has trouble taking up space and being prioritized in your personal relationships. Characters like Boa Hancock and Hinata and even like Fruits Basket. All of these shows are subliminally telling you that men are the prize and that you need to put yourself and how you authentically want to show up and how you are naturally on the back seat. You're constantly hearing this show after show after show, episode after episode after episode. For example, One Piece has what, over 1,000 episodes? You think you're not going to subliminally start picking that stuff up? Think it's subliminally not going to make an impression on your self-esteem? The male gaze impacts your sense of worth. If you're constantly seeing that the women who are valued by everyone in the anime and in the world that you're living in are women with big boobs, women who are quiet and meek and submissive, women who are obedient, women who don't take up much space, then you're going to start thinking, oh, I don't match this. There must be something wrong with me. That's when people start getting gender dysmorphia. People start putting men on a pedestal. That's when people start doing everything that they can to work for the attention of a man. Is attention really valuable when it comes from a man? Is what I'm saying. You deserve more. You deserve more in anime is not reinforcing the fact that you deserve more. For example, in Fairy Tail, another anime, Lucy is constantly being subjected to how she looks. Like, that's the value that people see in her. Not in that she has all the keys of the zodiac, it's in how she looks. Sanji is constantly thirsting over women. He's weird. If you met a Sanji in the real world, would you want that man around your little sister? Point number 6. Women who don't conform into the meek, submissive, obedient, big boobed archetype are generally disliked. Everyone hates Sakura. People are constantly talking badly about Nobara from Jujutsu Kaisen. Last point is that otaku culture, and if you don't know what an otaku is, it's basically someone who identifies a lot with liking anime. All of otaku culture pretty much appeals to socially insecure men. Consuming something that is deeply male-centered, you're kind of internalizing those perspectives that this entire community tends to have, where women are to be devalued. And this again is brainwashing you into thinking that you need to become what these types of insecure men tend to value, which is meekness, submissiveness, and overall just a lack of an individual personality. I don't know if you resonate with the points that I just shared. Let me know in the comments what maybe came up, maybe where you felt restriction in what I said, whatever thoughts you might have that are contradicting my perspective. I'd love to hear it all. Here are next steps that you can do if you're someone who identifies with having a love for anime. Number 1, learn to nurture relationships with healthy women. And healthy women tend to have an abundance of things that they like doing. They tend to have personal hobbies. They tend to have numerous amounts of friends. They tend to be able to get along with people. Maybe not everyone for extended periods of time, but they have acquaintances. They have outer circle friends, inner circle friends, close friends. Like, healthy women tend to have a dynamic social life and things that they can do to keep themselves entertained and happy. The second thing that you can do, now that you have an awareness around how anime can be affecting you, is to not necessarily expect yourself to quit cold turkey. Like, anime is potentially a good resource. It can't be the only resource. And like, I have this understanding of anime, and I'm not gonna stop watching One Piece. I confess. When I see the weird behavior, I don't just act like that's normal. I point out that it's weird. And I understand that it is probably speaking to my subconscious, and I still have other hobbies and things that I like doing outside of consuming anime. Point number 3 would be to avoid binge watching the content. Because when you're binge watching and you're constantly seeing these patterns being reinforced, that's how it starts seeping into your subconscious. Like, yeah, enjoy your anime, but try to pace yourself. Try to do other things like eating, like showering, going for a walk. Another thing I like to add is ask yourself, would this behavior hold up in a matriarchy? In a society where women's needs being met was the norm. For example, where a woman telling a man that she doesn't want him to be invading her space was considered more than enough for that man to stop doing what he knows he shouldn't be doing. Something that's been really helpful when it comes to just deconditioning myself is to prioritize women's understandings and perspectives and to have more empathy when women do share things with you. We're constantly being fed information that women have less social value than men, which is inherently not true, just how humans are as animals, because what can happen without a woman? Overall, like, looking back at when I would consume a lot of anime, I was a completely different person. I genuinely centered what I thought would get me closer to like a man, or I was kind of boy crazy, or like I didn't really see men as the people that they are. Like, I had them on a pedestal. And now I just see them for what they are. I dress how I feel good. Entire aesthetic is something that I've embraced because I feel gorgeous in it, not because it gets me the attention of a man. My life is now centered around my dream life and the things that I want to be doing in it, the type of people that I want to be attracting, not in getting a man to like me. No one wants to feel like they're doing something for a man, but if you're worried about whether or not a man likes you, then that's a good sign that you need to do some inner work in terms of cultivating a healthier social presence, cultivating a richer inner world. Like, these are things that you can do. Thanks.